enslaved in other ways. We have enslaved our own ways, those workers behind the windows there in my classroom and so on. So, that's why he was hated and so on. And somehow Obama had to distance himself from it. But he talked recently in a prayer meeting in Washington, and he said he was a Christian. He said he was, quoted from the Bible, that those who are given much, they have to give much. He talked about the tax code and connected it with the love of the neighbor. The love of the neighbor demands an adjustment of the tax code and so on. He's translated a little bit wrong. The whole thing is love your neighbor because he is like you. And so the capitalists should see that the others, the workers, that they are like them, and therefore should have an equal tax code and so on. So that was a Christian argument. On the other hand, he is, of course, involved in innumerable international murders and so on, of bin Laden and of Saddam Hussein and of this other one in Libya, and one killing after the other. About 30,000 of these pilotless airplanes, they will station them here. There is an airport here in Michigan where they will be stationed, a lot of them. So we are in the middle of it again. And they can fly everywhere and shoot everybody and kill everybody. He says they didn't kill civilians and everybody around the globe. If you see that station 131 or something like that, it's an international station with a Russian part, an Indian part, and so on. When you want to get closer to the truth than you can hear, there you are. I mean, these people, you know, have a wider type of a view, and sometimes there are real true sentences which they say, which are it's a very, refreshing type of an experience. So that we bring in whatever we hear there. So, but the men of the future, the religious men of the future, may very well be a totally secularized person who nevertheless still has some religious motivation. That means he rescues, he translates certain material from the potentials from the sacred writings and translates them into a modern context. That is how religion could possibly survive. Okay, so then Iran builds atomic energy, which is of course a strange thing, because at the same time Germany tries to replace them, and all of Europe wants to follow Germany if Germany is effective. If they can really replace the atomic energy, and if they can really employ workers, and then Merkel comes through with the things and will be effective, then the other European 17 nations will follow Germany. So we could ask why Iran, insists, they say they will not build the bomb, but why they insist to have these atomic complexes when at the same time other nations see how dangerous they are ecologically. Maybe they don't have enough ecological understanding yet. They are part of the anti-atomic proliferation treaty, Iran is. So I don't know why they don't see the point there. So it would be something nice to discuss with them. Okay, so, and I mentioned already this, what we had here, the experience which we had. I tried to bring in the future studies of Osip Flechtheim, great futurologist, and it was destroyed here. And there's a question, how a stupid dean, associate dean, a woman and a Jew on top of it, could know anything about Osip Flechtheim, who was here in '43 and tried the same thing, and 100 universities rejected him. It has something to do with that our ruling class wants to determine what the future is like. So after they destroyed our future studies, they had a future program here from the capitalists here in town. So they want to make sure that the future will be as the present is, and that they will be on top and so on. So this is the real danger which we have to face. If we don't want to face, then we don't add anything to what anybody else says already. Okay, so now anything else about any other comment to what we said so far? You be free to air your feelings.
Are these systems that we've designed, or are we held captive by them? Can we turn this thing around?
Well, that's a
I'm
good
thinking that
question,
we-
you know,
I'm
who
thinking
is
that we
really,
can't.
who is really in charge, you know, I mean, if we had Bernhard here, he was a Mormon, and he was a very good man, but he was crucified here in 1980 because there was a depression, and campus was in horrible shape, and they wanted to close the religion department, and so on and so on. So, and they blamed him for all of this. But he, of course, had nothing to do with the finances of the state whatsoever. We could have gone to the thing there, to the Romney he was out already by that time. Romney was a governor once, so not this one, the father of the Romney now. And so, but the governor, of course, could not do anything neither. If we would shout at him and throw him out or whatever, it would not be the right thing. We would do an injustice. It's the ruling class in Detroit there which has to deliver the resources, and if they don't produce or their production goes down, then of course there will be no money. So then if we would go to them, you know, and say, why don't you do this? Will he be free, or will he also be part of the system? He will be. That is why Marx did not talk about the capitalists. He talked about capital. The name of the book is called Capital. So it is the system, it's not the people in the system, because you could say in a certain way that the capitalist is as much a prisoner of the system as are the people. And he will simply say, you know, he will point to a wider system, the Atlantic system or the Pacific system, in which he has to compete against the Germans or against the Japanese, you know. And therefore he has to fire people, or therefore he has to move his machinery to Mississippi, where there are no unions and where he has cheaper labor. Or if Mississippi is not enough, that he has to move into our colonies, which is Central and South America and the Philippines. And if that is not enough, then he has to go to China and to India. And for some time, the Chinese, who are communists, will make a deal with the capitalists. They get their industry. My son is involved in that. He produces air, and they build all kinds of factories over there. They get cheap labor from the Chinese. The Chinese know that these workers, you know, are abused, of course, like under capitalism. But that is a sacrifice which they make. If these things are built, they just will throw my son out and his boss, and they will man it themselves, and they will have their own CEOs and so on. That is the plan. That means they use capitalism as a cow, which they feed for a while in order to milk it. And they are milking it massively. They even gave us $1 billion or more, $1 trillion or whatever in money to bail us out. So much they like the capitalistic cow. So my son doesn't know exactly what they're doing, nor does his boss. They are just concerned. My son counts the profit which they make, and the government in China, you know, allows them a certain margin of profit, and that is enough for them to go over there. My son hates the trouble or whatever, but that has to be done. That means the capitalist makes a treaty with the devil in order to get some short-term profits. The communists think in wider terms. The businessman thinks in a few days, the statesman thinks in centuries. They get all the industrialization which they want by granting this, which means for their workers, of course, they may live under the same horrible conditions they lived in Baltimore and here in the tenement houses and so on for some time in terms of primitive capital accumulation. Okay, so no, the thing is, people are not easily in charge of their systems. There is no human subject which carries the system as such and could determine, you know, we have to change this or that. The system is something which has roots in our human potentials, which are objectivated. So we have a family system, we have an economic system, we have a political system, we have a system of nations and so on. And these objectifications become independent, as if they had their own soul or whatever. So that the worker who reproduces the capitalistic system can also become its victim. He can, you know, he can be at fault for throwing himself out in a certain sense. Wherever we have labor unions, the price of labor went up. And that sounds very good for the workers. But the system reacts sour on this. That means the wages are so high that they price themselves out of the market. And what happened here, we can look at the movie there, the first one, which Michael Moore made in terms of General Motors, which is very prophetic and shows, what happened later on. The labor unions, which are such an important thing, but use a situation which makes it very hard for the workers to have a job. And as we will see in this movie, then there is no government really to help them. So they get a U-Haul and drive all the way down to Mississippi in the hope that they will find something there. And when they come there, then suddenly Mississippi is under depression, because in the meantime they moved on to China or moved on to Nicaragua or whatever. So the European Union, which is socialistic fundamentally, has organized all this. So if you lose your job in Italy, then they plant you into Norway. But they teach you the language, they pay you for years to go to school, to resettle, to find a new house, to find a new car, they have the transportation for you, everything. Same thing if you get unemployed in Spain or whatever, all 17 nations. So that is missing here. That is one of these horrible deficits in terms of our social arrangements. So, and we have to learn that. I mean, we have to learn as fast as possible those things, right? So, no, we are not masters of the system. That means the human beings are not the subject of their actions. They're alienated from themselves into systems which follow their own laws and are very cruel in terms of individuals and their lives. So that is why, of course, we have these Roosevelt's liberals, and we have the other one, the neoliberals. And the Roosevelt liberals modified liberalism in terms of solidarity. That was really progress. This progress was cancelled again by Reagan and by the Chicago School, and that is how we got into this horrible disaster. And if these people, which they will not, the Republicans would come into power and would tumble the Obama, they would produce the same catastrophe, while Obama can push it out a little bit into the future. A few years. That is all we can expect. But the others will get, that means as soon as this Republican, whoever it is, it sits in the White House, 2 years later, 1 year later, a man would come to them as they came to Bush and say, Mr. President, the economy goes over the brink and you have to nationalize, and they will have to nationalize. But then they will not get money from China anymore. China said, though, they will not give us anything anymore. They said we should read the second volume of Adam Smith, which is not about the wealth of nations, but about morality. And we should learn to curb our greed and so on. So we will not get anything from them, and the tax money has been spent, so the president will not have available all the money which is needed to nationalize all the banks and nationalize all the productive industry. That is what George Soros wanted. That's why he paid Obama's election. And now he's horribly disappointed. And he was in Davos a few days ago. He said it doesn't matter if who comes at the White Obama or some other people, because they will all do the same stupid things. So he has finally seen what everybody knows anyway already. But it's amazing, that a top financier has that insight that civil society has to be regulated, and radically regulated. And the same thing is true for the ecological dimension. And Obama wants to persuade them. He wants to be a nice guy, don't be so greedy and so on. If you tell an alcoholic, you should not drink anymore, you know what he will do? He will go on drinking. And the same thing is with the bastards who rule this country in New York, not in Washington. Washington is just an appendix to New York. By the way, yesterday the last camp of Occupy Wall Street was overcome there in Washington. You see, the police went in and threw them all out. And I think that was the last one which existed. So it doesn't mean that the movement as such will change. So, by the way, that movement gives us a good chance to answer your question once more. So there is the life world where we are sitting here, where the churches are operating and artistic groups and the neighborhood and the love affairs and the family and so on. This life world is still characterized by communicative rationality to some extent. We talk with our neighbor and so on. And it is steered over the medium of ethics still and morality. Usually we don't steal anything from our neighbors and so on. And then we have differentiated out of that life world is the economic system, and that is characterized by instrumental rationality totally. And it is steered over the medium of money. And then there's a political system which is also totally characterized by functional rationality, and it is steered over the medium of power and money and so on, and they go together and one buys the other and so on. So we see, this whole system of human condition. Inside we see the human action system with culture, society, individual, and behavioral organism and so on. And all these systems, there's nothing personal about them. So when you talk about these systems to religious people, they will not listen. They will just be very disturbed. I tried that once to do that. They think individuals, like this theme, which I didn't make up there, which was supposed to be inviting, is, what are we doing for ourselves? Nothing, because they have nothing to do whatsoever. They have the feelings, they have the right to express their opinions. They can express their opinions as long as they want to. The systems will not yield, because even some massive group, it is rather the other way around, that the system determines people, then the people determine the system. So there are a lot of Romney there, a lot of Catholics which vote again for Romney there in some of the states, a lot of evangelicals and so on and so on. And I think they don't vote themselves, they respond to certain things in the system, and then, maybe even against their own interests. Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Anything else?
So the system itself distorts their consciousness in that sense.
Yeah, I think so. Now revolution, of course. I teach this one class on religion and revolution. It's the only one in the United States and Canada about religion and revolution. And the Gregor Baum in Montreal, he always says this is impossible. That's unbelievable that this is possible. And I even went to a control board here recently and got it through again, so I can even continue to teach it. So can one make a revolution? Of course one can make a revolution. So people think, what the government today is so smart and has so many information. So do the people, about the internet and so on. So it is always, there's a balance between the weapons of the controlling authorities and then the weapons which the people have and so on. As they said recently, 99%, so the ruling class is only 1%, and the 99%, if enough of them want to die, they they can change, of course, but it will be a bloody thing. We talked about the rabbi there, the Bivak down there, and he was so anti-socialistic, as I had never seen him before. Socialists will lose, they all failed, and so on and so on. So I remind him of the kibbutzim movement, which is of course completely communistic. I reminded him of all the Jews who fought in the Russian Revolution, quite successfully, and all the Christian orders, which are all communistic and so on. So, but the Jews had never had it so good, except under Islam in Spain, as they have it here, and therefore they do everything, to support the system and so on. But it was somewhat pitiful to see the little man, fighting so tremendously against himself. But even he would say, that a situation can come about where people suffer so much that they, make a revolution. He thought that the socialists were idolaters. They don't have the true God anymore, therefore they make society into a God or whatever. But there are many revolutionary types who do not do that. Marx himself said that the communist society will be only one society and there will be something else after communism. So communism will not be the kingdom of God, but it will be a more human thing than that what we have here now, and they will not urinate anymore on people whom they have just killed, and they will not assassinate people in their home at night and kill their children and whatever. So there are more human societies than we are now in this paragraph, or in this horrible regression in which we find ourselves. But that as far as the socialistic thing is concerned, but the revolution would be possible, but the people who do that have to be educated. Our 99% are not educated. So you have to have people who become traitors to their class, as Marx was, as Lenin was, and so on. And they have to know their insights and their philosophy adequately and know the facts about the system and how it functions and what has to be replaced and what not, and what has to be used in order to change it, and so on. Change would go through legislation, new laws, the poverty laws would have to be cancelled, and so on and so on. So, but all that needs, knowledge. It needs juridical knowledge, ecological knowledge, and so on, which is simply not present in people. What we do, in these campaigns and this discussion in the public sphere, is to let people express their opinion. And people, have a very strong tendencies inside to be heard, and to say something, no matter how stupid it is. What is said in the public sphere is an expression of the pathology of reason, and so on, because they don't go through a real argumentative process. So therefore it is not there, the release of opinions is not there in order to change the system, but to let loose steam, so that people who are angry or whatever can express their opinions. But opinions belong to the particularity of people. Only when they are universalized would they gain any element of truth in itself, and then could produce systemic changes. After all, they are our product, these systems. They are of our own making, they are man-made. Not the natural systems, they are not man-made, but the others, the historical systems, are all slaveholder systems were human products, all serf systems were human products, all capitalistic systems are human products. So we can, in principle, we can change what we ourselves produce, have produced. Right? But what that means now in the present situation, what I wanted to add to it was these movements, right? So when the life world is somehow colonized by the economy and by the polity, colonized as nature is colonized and as other nations are colonized. So we do not only colonize Central and South America and the Philippines, we colonize their territory, we colonize the rainforest, and so on. This colonization, there is not only external colonization, there's an internal colonization, where these two subsystems colonize the life world of their own citizens. And then from the fringe of these life world, movements, spontaneous movements come up, women movement, civil rights movement, labor movement, and so on and so on. And they try, to modify things. They can be spontaneous and they're very transitory, because the bureaucracy of the government, which is a tool of the ruling class, they sit there all in their offices. The others sit in the tents. They get wet and they get cold and so on. So it cannot last for long. But sometimes, a push, we call that popularism sometimes, a popular push or so can force some legislation, but not necessarily to change the whole system. What Martin Luther King did, was to change some legislation, and the blacks could do some things and so on, but it did not change the system in any way. So a systemic change would need a massive movement from below, from the life world, where millions and billions of people would be so disgusted that they would simply overrun their ruling class, no matter what the costs. And if the ruling class still are in control of the state and the military and the police, like they beat them up again in Washington and so on, then it will be very costly, for any kind of a movement. But this is one way how we could think, to make systemic changes by massive movement, people who lose their jobs. So let's see, for instance, the Republicans would come in. They would put up the Friedman plan again. They would not go back to Keynes as they did all over Europe. And they then would push the economy to the brink. And then maybe even would deny nationalization, and the banks and the industries too big to fail would be allowed to fail by leaving them to the market. Then they would have an unemployment to 20 to 30%, and the cities would burn. And the president would have to govern by executive order, which he, by the way, threatened already now, to not to follow the Congress anymore, but to do his own thing, which he maybe should have done. But even to send the Congress home and so on, and then send tanks to Detroit or wherever the cities are burning, and ask for the emergency laws, which Roosevelt didn't do yet, but which a future president may have to do. And that then one could go the Chavez way, the socialistic way, but for that these 99% are not educated enough. Or one would have to go, the Argentine way or whatever, the fascist way. And that's much more likely. So that is corporatism. That means the government and the corporation, they are already together. They exchange people all the time. They would rule and just let the 99% babble around their opinions on television, and girls, blonde girls and blue eyes and all the shit, which is just to control them, including religion. That is why it makes sense, to talk about these problems also in a religious sphere. We have no public sphere in Catholicism. It's an authoritarian church which does not allow public opinion to rise. So the public opinion comes from the Frenches, and there are some critical journals. In Germany, I had one which I collected since 1945, and Eugen Kogan and Dirks and so on. We will go to Rome. Hopefully we can do something about that, and I want to talk about Adorno and this Eugen Kogan is the author of the SS state, so he studied the fascist system. He was in a concentration camp himself. So that's what we would follow then. It would not look like Hitler or brown shirts or black shirts or whatever. It would be American type of fascism. A lot of democracy talk and so on and so on. Hitler also said that he was a democracy. They're all democratic. So that is the way how the system could be changed. That's a very concrete way how it will probably happen. If Obama comes in with this Roosevelt thing, then he will modify some things, and that will let the system last a little bit longer. Maybe they have to get injections all the time, new money to the banks or the industries or whatever. But it would at least last. It's not forever, but for some years, it could go. When you get the others in, it would not last longer than 2 years. And that they don't know this, that they cannot remember who they are, I mean, these Tea Party people, they're certainly honest Americans, I don't have any doubts about their goodwill or whatever, but their cognitive aspects are just so minimal, because they not only go back behind the second Roosevelt, but because the first Roosevelt, who already wanted federal control of the market. He already wanted medical insurance for all Americans. That was in 1900. He had seen, the revolution in New York. That the lower part of Manhattan, all the people in the tenement houses, rebelled. And they marched up to the upper Manhattan, and they burned down all the houses of the owners. And he became the mayor of New York at that time. And he settled it, not only, by violence, but also by having insights that there were real problems. He was at the end of, the first depression was 1827. He had almost 100 years of continual business cycle, continual depressions of 10 years, and then prosperity. People died, got sick, and so on. What I described in my book there, that they had 4 children and one survived, that was normal. Most of the children died. The tenement houses, the dirt in between the tenement houses, the epidemics, the hot summer and so on. No light. So they put millions of people from Europe all into these tenement houses along the whole coast there. And so Roosevelt saw all this. So and these Boston Tea Party people, these new ones, they had nothing to do with the old Tea Party, have no idea, what they say or what they do. And that's also true with these candidates, Ron Paul there, he's a very extreme case and has a lot of youth behind him, because he says you can do what you want to, and so on, you can have your own Social Security. You know what that would mean. They would be 65 years old and nothing would be accumulated, and the state would have to pay them anyway. This is all, has nothing to do with statesmanship or whatever. He's embarrassed when he's asked what he should do about the homosexuals or whatever, Internationally, he just wants to bring all, we are in 150 states, he wants to bring them all home. How does he want to employ them when he brings them all home? How does he want to secure the markets there, where we get cheap labor from? Cheap things there in Vietnam was about rubber, El Salvador was about coffee, Iraq was about oil. I mean, how does he want to get entrance to all of these things? It's just insane, But 40% of his followers are young people who know even less than the old ones. Contrary to the public opinion that they know more than that fact. But I have very doubts that they do.
Rudy, we've got 10 minutes left. Did you want to?
Yes, let's look at this movie. What we want to do is to look at the movie, which we know already. It doesn't matter now if we like this Michael Moore or not. Maybe just to see if there is anything. He describes civil society as it is here in our area, and to see if he has some awareness already of this ecological problem. And we can do that for our entertainment and our relaxation, and at the same time look if there is something, and we can discuss that the next time. Okay, that's the plan.
Great.
Okay.
Good. What do we do? Do we have a machine or what?
Right there behind it.
Which one?
Okay, let's take this one. Let's take that Roger thing there. That was his first one.
Rudy, in this class that I finished, well, I'm not finished because it's got another 15 weeks to go, this Just Faith class. Yesterday we were talking about the international markets, and
Yeah.
we're really looking at what the corporate world is in
Right.
the world.
That's good. Yeah.
And it's kind of tough when you start talking with the realization what the church has done or has not done.
Yeah.
Can the church modify or move?
Right. Yeah.
And when we were having this discussion last night, I said one of the big movers should be the church,
Yeah.
the Catholic Church, insofar as push and pull goes for the immigrant problems. Why are they leaving their country to come to America?
Yeah.
And we know it's a lot of violence and a lot of greed, and those things get up there so much, they thought, well, they just want education, and they don't realize that one of the driving forces out of Mexico are corporations, like the free trade zones,
Yeah.
and all that stuff that just drives them
Well, I mean,
off
it's
the
very
land.
simple. You can tell very simply. I mean, there are 12 million people who have come into this country. This is not the American way, because we usually took our instruments of production down there, because then we don't have to pay the social costs. Now they came in. Now the corporations want them. They want to have cheap labor. Cheap labor comes to them. They needed jobs. The corporation needs workers, and they need cheap workers. Americans don't want to pay work so cheaply, so therefore there is free space for them. That is all. That is the economic, that's the rules of the house which went astray. So this is an economic problem, and many of them are Catholics. Now that is why the Catholic Church could come in there in some way. But what to do, these people need jobs, the capitalist needs workers now. So Bush, for instance, was very mild on that issue because he listened to what the ruling class says. The ruling class says, don't throw them out, then we don't have cheap labor anymore. Don't be so stupid, So the ruling class wants them to stay. But then, sometimes they want to punish the employers, but that doesn't really go through. And in the end, the ruling class will have its will. They need those 12 million workers there. Because they are cheaper than the Americans are. So that is the reality. Now what can the church do about this, you know? If the church would say, treat them well, pay them just wages, the capitalists would not have any need for them anymore. They would send them back. So, you know, the church would have to be very sophisticated. Now, the church does have a very sophisticated ethics, which was the greatest secret here in this country. They simply did not teach it. And so what this class can do, it can make people familiar with this solidarism, which is the Catholic view, the Catholic natural law position. So if it works or not, we think, you know, we have long gone beyond this, really. But it would be good for the Americans to learn it first, you know. Their church is not so ugly as it looks sometimes, you know. 40 years after Marx, they found out that Marx was right, and they tried to establish their own thing. But they hold on to private property of the means of production, and that is hopeless.